Is ISIS already in America? And are we ready? This is the Daily Wrap from New York City. And welcome back, everybody. Last week on CNN, FBI counterterrorism head John Steinbeck was asked if any sleeper cells existed in the United States.
There are individuals that have been in communication with groups like ISIL who have a desire to conduct an attack, yes.
That are living in the U.S. right now.
Correct.
And yesterday on CNN's State of the Union, Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, doubled down, saying law enforcement is very involved in tracking down suspected domestic terrorists.
The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security do a pretty good job of tracking the travel of individuals of suspicion, of investigating potential acts of terror or material support to terrorism. Just this past Friday, there were arrests of 5 individuals who were providing material support allegedly to ISIL.
Now I'm joined by former Special Agent for the FBI and now CEO of United States Continued Services, LLC. Jonathan T. Gilliam joins us. John, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Be here with you. Thank you for having me.
So John, 2 questions. First, how serious of a threat are we facing? And do you believe that there is, or are, I should say, ISIS sleeper cells in the United States ready to attack right now?
Well, I know definitely there are people who are inspired. I mean, we know without a doubt there are people who have been inspired by ISIS that are here. We know that there are people that have been inspired by fundamental Mohammedanism that live here in the United States. Whether or not there are sleeper cells or there are operatives that have actually been shipped over here or who have been covertly moved over here, that is something that I personally do not know. But I will tell you, if there is actually sleeper cells, that they discover a cell, there will be immediate action that's acted upon. I think, though, the biggest thing that I have a problem with is that we've allowed ourselves to get to a position now where we are reacting versus acting. And that is a big problem. It's also an example of how badly we have fought in the war on terror since 2001.
So are these attacks preventable? Do you believe that Homeland Security and the FBI have a handle on the situation?
Well, they have a handle on what they know, but see, it's the what they don't know that's the real problem. That's where the real sleeper cells exist. And that is where the Muslim community can help, although I doubt that that's going to happen, because the pressure for them to not say something or to not be involved is actually the greatest hindrance that we have. You know, to serve and to protect, that's what's on the side of most police cars. But it doesn't say that we can be, and law enforcement can be everywhere at all times. So the Muslim population really does have to step up to the plate. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing if we can have a breakthrough there that will make a difference.
And intelligence certainly is the key, and lone wolves are certainly a problem, particularly if they're acting alone, if they're willing to give their own lives. How do you prevent something like that? That's certainly the scary part. Meanwhile, the president seems to think that the only reason the media is spending so much time covering ISIS is because of, get this, ratings.
Do you think the media sometimes overstates the sort of level of alarm people should have about terrorism and this kind of chaos as opposed to a longer term problem of climate change and epidemic disease?
Absolutely. And you know, I don't blame the media for that. You know, what's the famous saying about local newscasts, right? If it bleeds, it leads, right? You show crime stories and you show fires, because that's what folks watch. It's all about ratings.
Post-presidency, Jonathan, perhaps he could be an executive producer somewhere, because he certainly knows what's working on television. You know, he says he never watches it. Anyway, are we getting upset about nothing? In other words, is the media blowing, as the president indicates, that the threat of terrorism and the war on ISIS is just something that's being blown out of proportion?
Well, the president and his crew are experts at getting elected and running for election, and they continue to run for election. What they don't do well at all is fight a war or fight a specific unconventional war like the one on terror. All we have to do is look overseas at who's threatening us, how they're threatening us, and what they're doing to the hostage that they do take. You combine that with the things that have happened in Australia, in Canada, and over in Paris, you're going to start to see the same thing can happen here. It's logistically a little bit harder to get those operatives over here, But once they have them here, you have things like the Boston Marathon. And I think a big thing that I've talked about before is that, if they just went in and hit a mall, you're going to see things change in this country. They're going to be affected greatly. A mall is where the middle America goes on the weekends. And I think that's going to have a huge impact, and it's going to start to bring things home. And these are the types of people who can do something like this.
I think you're right, John. And you brought up Boston. That's a great example of not too many deaths, obviously. People were maimed, many people injured, but the psychological effects of just a couple of bombs going off at a major event like that, or some sort of gun attack in any mall around the country. Again, the spread of fear and everything that we would see in the media certainly would have an effect there. So we appreciate you joining us, John. Thanks so much again.
You got it. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's time to bring in our panel. We have attorney Heather Hansen here today, Forbes columnist Rick Unger, and author and Huffington Post columnist Jenny Crumpton. Rick, your reaction?
Well, look, in the world of CNN, every bit of news is breaking news. But the truth is, this is not breaking news. We've known of sleeper cells for quite some time. Jonathan and I actually carry on this conversation quite a bit. I disagree with him on many things. I do agree with him, however, that this whole attack of a shopping mall could be the most devastating thing we could face.
Heather.
That's absolutely the case. But the media does deal in fear. And I think Obama's point in that interview was to say that, okay, we can have fear, but we also have to have some positive change, that we can't just deal in fear. And especially when it comes to dealing with these things, we have to find a more effective way than just to run around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Yeah. Jenny?
Yeah, counterterrorism strategy 101 is don't tell on television what intelligence you have. I live right by Grand Central, and every day I wake up and go to sleep knowing that that's a high-level target for terrorists in New York City. But I know that authorities in New York City have a very good handle on counterterrorism. And so what good is it going to do to panic, to fearmonger? And I agree with you. I think, Heather, that President Obama is really just trying to keep things calm and under control, because panic is exactly what ISIS wants us to do.
No, you're certainly right about New York City having a handle on things. Here it's been now 14 years since 9/11. And there have been some attempted attacks, obviously, at Times Square just a couple of years ago. But so far, at least here in New York, so good. I'm just wondering, it's a matter of when and not if. Anyway, we got to go to commercial. Sorry about that, Jenny. Coming up next, Chief Justice Roy Moore of Alabama feels judges in his state are not bound by a federal ruling that shot down the state's ban on gay marriage. Others agree with him. We'll let you know more after the break. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. This is Daily Download, and I am your host and tour guide, kind of like Julie McCoy from The Love Boat, but different. Joe Concha. Anybody born after 1980 saying, who is Julie McCoy? Anyway.
I know who Julie McCoy is. I know, I'm old.
Rick does, that's true. They dated once back in 84, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
We all had a crush on her, right?
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about right now. No tangents. Today in Alabama, the state started issuing gay licenses to gay couples despite an attempted block by conservative Chief Justice of the state's Supreme Court, Roy Moore. Justice Moore issuing an order late on Sunday directing probate judges not to provide marriages to gay couples. The reason, you ask? Moore feels Alabama judges are not bound by a federal ruling last month that shot down the state's ban on gay marriage. Governor Mike Huckabee agrees with that logic and says that he believes, or at least he states, that states should have, the final say on the legality of gay marriage.
One thing I am angry about, though, Hugh, is this notion of judicial supremacy, where if the courts make a decision, I hear governors and even some aspirants to the presidency say, well, that's settled, and it's the law of the land. No, it isn't the law of the land. Constitutionally, the courts cannot make a law. They can interpret one, and then the legislature has to create enabling legislation, and the executive has to sign it and has to enforce it.
Now, Rick, you're shaking your head. Huckabee used the term, and I'm quoting here, notion of judicial supremacy. Does he have a point?
No, he really doesn't. I mean, he and Roy Bean, who is shockingly the chief Supreme Court judge in Alabama, Roy Moore, who has been kicked out of office twice before, by the way, run for governor twice and failed. They are what's called nullificationists. They actually believe that the state law takes supremacy over the United States Constitution. Sorry, guys, but it doesn't.
No.
And the federal courts do have the right to rule on constitutionality of these laws. And not only did Moore step in on the federal court decision, he also now has ignored the Supreme Court, who today refused to enforce this.
Are there any other lawyers here that could chime in?
Yes, right here.
Oh,
by the way.
happened?
It just so happens that
Fantastic
I am
one.
here. Well, the truth of the matter is, first of all, he has set up these probate judges for suits against them. And this afternoon, somebody actually filed suit because they have got to enforce these laws, and they could actually have their attorney's costs and more against them. You know, you've got Clarence Thomas and Justice Scalia with a scathing dissent about the order from the Supreme Court today, saying that they should have waited for this to give states their deference. And that is true. But ultimately, like Rick said, just like on this panel, the lawyer has the last word.
Interesting. Jenny.
7-2, baby.
Here's the real problem, and I'm from Alabama. I've been watching this go on.
Where's
the
your
real
accent? You have zero accent.
Well, it comes out when I drink a little whiskey. But anyway, the real problem is that this is Roy Moore and Mike Huckabee's religious beliefs that they are trying to enforce on people.
You're a reverend?
I am a Christian, I am a reverend, and I believe that people should be able to get married no matter what. And actually, I wish I was down there in Birmingham today. It's a beautiful park right outside the courthouse, and I wish I was there to do some marriages. But you know, there's a big problem when we cry religious freedom all the time, but then we want to take our interpretations of the Bible that a lot of Christians do not agree with, especially younger Christians, and then enforce them on other people.
Okay.
That's what's happening here.
That is a human argument, that is an emotional argument.
But it's not the law.
The legal argument is what, Heather?
Well, the legal argument is ultimately that the Supreme Court wins. When it comes to deciding whether or not the laws are constitutional, the Supreme Court wins. Now, the point is, though, that the majority of voters in Alabama agree with Huckabee and agree with this idea that it should be illegal. That's not enough. Although the voters may want it to be enough, that's not enough.
If the founders wanted the Bible to be the ruling document of our country, they would have made the Bible the founding document of our country, not the Constitution. What kills me are these people who yell that they're strict constitutionalists until it bothers them. They don't like it. And I'm afraid Governor Huckabee is very much one of those people. He's all for the Constitution until it goes against him.
Yeah, see, these arguments aren't mutually exclusive. It can be a human argument and a legal argument all together. And you know, there are a lot of Christians who are standing up in Alabama and saying, no, we are for equality and freedom. We want our LGBT brothers and sisters to have federal and state rights. They are productive members of our society, and we want them to have that.
More and more states are going the way of gay marriage. Is it now inevitable that it will be the law of the land, Jenny?
Absolutely.
I think so. Absolutely.
Rick and Heather, you
No
agree?
doubt about it. We've got this is
And
the
sooner than you
37th.
think, because the Supreme Court's
I
going
mean,
to
if
hear it.
Alabama's there
That's
already,
right.
I mean.
It's true. You know, we're at number 37 here, and in the spring, the Supreme Court is going to make it so that it is the law of the land. And it's nice, I think, that we have done it step by step rather than in one fell swoop, because it's given people who may otherwise have some trouble a little bit of time to ease into it. And I think that's what the justices wanted.
And if you're a court watcher, you got one heck of a hint this morning.
That's right.
When seven Supreme
of them,
Court
yes.
justices say they will not enforce that stay, they are telling you where they're leaning on the question.
In the dissent, Thomas said so. He
Yes, he
said,
did.
listen,
That's
you guys
right.
are tipping your hand here, and
That's
that's
right.
not the way we do things, which he may be right about, but they are tipping their hand, and we're
But
headed in that direction.
He may be right about that, but at the same time, you can't enforce
Can't
a stay
stop.
you think is incorrect just
That's
because you
right.
might tip
Just
your
the-
hand.
that's right.
So.
It'll be an interesting election in 2016 because you'll have the GOP, who in the past,
Sadly, yes.
That's cute. But even President Obama in 2008 and Hillary Clinton, they both evolved on
Yes,
gay marriage,
that's
right?
right.
Because they saw where the winds were shifting, and politicians do that. I'm not saying it's a Democratic thing. But in 2016, I just wonder, can a Governor Huckabee still be anti-gay marriage and actually win anywhere outside of Iowa? Can any of the other candidates who seem to be a little bit more moderate socially, whether you're talking Christie or you're talking Walker, I'm just wondering if this is an issue where it's already been basically decided.
But isn't that the problem with the primary? Because maybe they can win the primary, but they can't win the general election. And that's the
exactly.
problem the
That's a great
Republican
point.
Party does have.
Did I ever tell you how astute my friend Heather is at analyzing politics? She's exactly
She's a legal
right.
genius.
They'll win some primaries. primaries because, as somebody pointed out earlier, the people of Alabama are not happy that the Supreme Court ruled this way, and Huckabee's going to do just fine there. But he will not be elected president with that
But you
kind of
also
position.
have to ask who go to the polls, you know.
Right. That's
true,
And in
too.
Alabama, there is a deep movement of young people.
We got to get out in a second, so this will be a quick lightning round. Taking a libertarian point of view, should government be involved in gay marriage at all?
Some have proposed that they not be. And in fact, in Oklahoma, one of the propositions is let's not have civil marriages at all, and that takes away this problem altogether.
Rick, 5 seconds.
It's not about government being involved. It's about the Constitution, Equal Protection Clause, protecting people who wish to do it.
Well done, Jenny.
What Rick said.
That is
Love,
refreshing.
baby.
Pithy. Coming up next on the Daily Wrap, is global warming the biggest scam ever? We will discuss. This is the Daily Wrap on Newsmax TV from a chilly, sleety, miserable, wish I were in Alabama kind of New York City.
Alabama.
And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha from right above Bryant Park here in New York City. I don't know if that's been shared with you before, but it's great. It's got a skating rink, it's got a bar, ping pong tables, everything. It's like being in Rick's backyard, but different. Yeah, except for the ping pong table, it's slightly different. The climate change debate has yet to cool down. See how I did that? Both sides continue to point to undeniable proof that either the planet is getting warmer or it just ain't. Now, a British journalist is questioning the method used by scientists to calculate the Earth's climate change, calling it, quote, one of the greatest scientific scandals of all time. Now, Christopher Booker, he writes for Britain's The Telegraph, says that climate data from stations in South America, Antarctica, have been adjusted since the 1950s to give the impression that the Earth's temperature is rising more than original data showed. In fact, data recorded by 3 weather stations in South America found all had their initial raw readings adjusted to show lower temperatures in the 1950s and higher temperatures today. Why is this important? Because scientists use this data to project changes overall around the globe. If this is true, Rick, is this a game changer?
Might be. The problem is, just like the whole vaccination question, why the you know what? Are politicians making these decisions for us instead of scientists? I read the article. I thought it was fascinating data. I've been reading data for years on both sides. I don't know if there's a fix-in. You know what I do know? Scientists have to be able to go off, reach a conclusion if possible, and the politicians need to stay out of it until we have a better idea of what's really been going on.
Jenny, you were furiously writing something down.
Well, you know, I'm just thinking, is this a South American conspiracy from the 1950s? And did you notice how the weather stations up here got our Snowmageddon like completely wrong? You know, I'm just not sure how much this really affects things, but what I do know is that Nixon implemented the EPA in 1970 for a very good reason. And that was because we were seeing that, you know, car emissions and carbon emissions and pollution, we needed to start working on a solution. We really needed to take into consideration what we were doing to our resources and to our environment. And we still need to do that. No matter what the extreme ends of the argument say, it's still important for our children
You know
and
what
grandchildren.
I do for fun on the weekends now that I have a kid and I don't
not
go
sure
out
we
as
really
much
wanna
as I
know.
besides the other thing I was
Sure, it's
telling you about
appropriate
before.
family show.
No, I go back and read certain periodicals from the 80s and the 70s and telling us by now in 2015 we should all be dead if we live in New York City because everything was supposed to melt and Manhattan was supposed to be underwater.
But
and
we've taken
know what?
measures.
we haven't taken enough to
Listen,
prevent a whole island from sinking.
The horse is out of the barn. People care. And I don't care what you call it. Maybe it's not global warming, maybe it's just pollution, but if you read the New York Times article today, for Hispanics, this is a major issue. 54% are either extremely or very concerned
Why do you
about...
think it affects Hispanics?
Well, according to the article, they're more affected because they're more affected by the hurricanes. They're more affected because many of them live off the land in many ways, and so they're more affected. But they have a deep caring about this. So whether it's a bunch of BS or not, it really doesn't matter anymore. Now what matters is what can we do, if you're talking about 2016, to bring those people so that they're interested.
And to carry that forward a bit, you know, I've never been sure. I don't like the people who have made it into a religion. global warming. I also don't like people who have taken this strong stand against it, knowing that my grandchildren, your grandchildren, may be severely affected by it. So you know what? Could it hurt? Will it kill anybody to just be careful?
Yeah.
I understand when you raise any cost to the economy of significance, yes, we should be very careful about accepting science that we don't know is real.
That's right.
But is it going to kill us to be careful?
Yep.
In case we're right.
And the thing is we don't know what the impact of our new technologies are going to be. We do know that the southern global areas of our world have serious resource shortages. The northern hemisphere is basically taking a lot of the resources from there. There's a lot to consider around this whole issue of climate care.
I think the politicalization, though, it may be the problem because, again, when you are adjusting,
It is the problem.
you're adjusting data to fit an argument. That's something that I found disturbing.
But who
it's
was
those
doing
words.
that?
It's those words, global warming. If you change it to pollution, I don't think anyone has a problem anymore. And really, that's what we're talking about here. It's just the words that are being used.
Over the next 2 decades, the EPA's rules to fight global warming will cost the economy $2.23, not million, not billion, trillion dollars. It will raise energy prices and lower families' incomes and reduce jobs by 600,000, according to the Heritage Foundation, which last I heard is conservative. So, Rick, you talked before, better safe than sorry, but that is a big price tag. We only have 40 seconds.
And it's absolutely fair to keep it in mind. I think when people who are big believers in global warming pretend that's not a factor, they're wrong. You do have to keep it in mind. You have to balance the equities. And that's the only way you can deal with a problem like this. But get the science first.
Yeah. And we have to start thinking outside the box and use these ideas of ways to improve it to make money. So there's got to be something, solar power, wind power, I don't know, but find a way
Green
to
energy
finance
is a
it.
good thing regardless.
Not everybody agrees.
Not everybody agrees. There's a solar. I'll have to get that name come to me when it comes back. Anyway, coming up next, it's time for Political Potluck. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. Yeah, welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. It's time for Political Potluck. You know the drill, veteran watchers. Political Potluck is where each of us brings a story to the party, just like bringing a dish to a potluck dinner, which is, I swear, the kind of party I never heard of before hosting this show and this segment, but apparently exists. So, okay, let's start with Heather Hansen. What's your culinary masterpiece?
The Homeland Security Department has set up a hotline for illegal aliens who feel as though the customs agents are not abiding by Obama's amnesty policies to call in and complain.
Do you have that number?
I do not have
We
the
have
number.
to get that
I
number.
so love, oh no, I've already got it.
Really?
Yeah, I got it down. It's like
1-800
Homeland
Druidia?
Security hotline. If you are currently trying to cross the border and you're being shot at, please press 1.
1. Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to cross the border and they're not being nice to you, please press 2.
It's
Unbelievable.
I wonder if they pull that when in all the prompts now, or at least the companies that you call for customer service, they do this little trick, right? You used to just press 0 and you eventually would get somebody. It would says invalid entry, invalid entry. They stick it at like 7,
Right, and there's
at
a random
4.
number.
So I wonder if they're doing that here.
It's a
Oh, I'm
really good
sure
way to
they
cut
are.
down
The
illegal
voice.
immigration. You can frustrate people so
They just
badly
stay
with
where they
this
are.
that they'll forget this. I'm going home.
It's much more efficient.
Quattro,
at home.
Quattro.
You know what?
Sorry, we've interrupted.
I think it is funny, but in the same time, it's really insulting to the agents who are doing their job and out there. And I understand having a hotline where people can call in and say, have questions. But to invite complaints against people who are out there doing their job, it's a slap in the face to these agents.
The only way that I can really see this being relevant is, there are reports in Texas of rape, harassment by male guards against female immigrants and their children. And, I've seen ICE work in New York City firsthand. I've seen them arrest clergy.
ISIS has arrested clergy in New York City?
ICE.
Oh, ICE.
The other
story.
terrorist
That's
group.
sleeper
No,
cell.
I'm kidding about that. But, I do think that, as a person of faith, I believe that all people should have dignity, even if they're desperate enough to be trying to cross our borders illegally. And so, if this has anything to do with keeping women and children a little more safe, then
would be nice if it
I'm
was the case.
for it.
I agree with you, but I think it's more than that. I think it's that if you were being asked questions about what you've done in your past, whether you've broken any laws, whether you've been involved in domestic abuse situations, then you can call and complain because that's not consistent with Obama's amnesty policy.
And I think it's moments like this that it's a shame that Craig Ferguson is no longer on television. This
Oh,
is,
he would
I
have-
have to
yes,
tell
it's
you,
true, it's
this is
true.
one of the funniest stories. I mean, talk about, now I know I'm supposed to be a liberal and all, but a hotline for illegal immigrants trying to cross the border running into trouble. I just think that's precious.
Do
I
a
wish
Craig
I had thought of it
Ferguson
for a movie, you know?
impression.
I can't do a good impression. No,
you
I
were
don't have
doing
that
well.
skill.
Yeah, we have to
I
get
don't
tape.
have that
We have to
skill.
get tape of some of these calls and play it here.
Yeah.
We're not getting tape. I promise you, the viewers sitting at home.
We will not subject you to
get the
this.
camera on me. When we get this number, we will call.
We will
We're going to prank call it.
Well, no, we're not going to prank. We're
No,
going to go
press the
through.
number.
Call it.
Look, my name is Joe Concha. That's Spanish.
But
That's
can you do the rest in Spanish?
Spanish for...
Sí.
See?
Yo no sé.
Oh, muy bien, qué
Anyway.
We
bueno.
gotta get the number.
Ricky, ¿qué pasa?
Está
See how I did
bien.
that?
Está bien. Está bien.
3 years of
about- So good.
Spanish in high school. Don't you have a daily?
Well,
don't you have a potluck?
I actually lived in Mexico, so that's where my Spanish comes from.
Good to hear. Do you
Across the
have a
border
potluck?
legally. I have a potluck.
Thank
I
you.
have a question. I want to know why the Armed Service Committee of the United States Senate is going so easy on Ash Carter. He had his hearings last week. He made this big fuss about how it is important that the Defense Department stop wasting money. Everybody agreed with him. They all loved him. There's only one problem. Ash Carter has probably wasted more defense money than anybody in the history of the State Department. Why? He was in charge of the budget, the development, the execution of the F-35 program, one of the greatest failures in our history that only cost $1.5 trillion and still going. And yet nobody bothered to say, well, if you're so against this waste, how'd you manage to waste so much money?
Right. But why? But
Why?
the question is why? Why isn't anyone asking that question?
Exactly.
It's are they tired of these hearings and these different, fighting so much and they just figure he's going to get in? Like what is the
No, it's
reasoning?
because the Republicans like him. They like him. They think
So
that
they're
he's a
just
hardline
ushering him
defense.
in despite
yeah, and
his-
despite all of them making these speeches, John McCain, chairman of
Yeah,
the committee,
right.
yes, we have to cut government waste, and we'll just look the other way. We won't even talk about the fact that the vehicle you created to go into Afghanistan and Iraq, you overran the manufacturing. You made 27,000, and you're actually melting them down for scrap now. Cost of the taxpayer, $2 billion.
Can we read about this somewhere?
You can read about it in my column at Forbes.com.
Yeah.
Funny you should ask.
I knew
about
it.
it.
There was an ulterior motive to that entire potluck. Go figure.
Learn
with
a
the
lot
Gunger.
more
But
than you do
an
by
excellent
watching.
point, though, by the way. Anyway, we got to go to our next segment, which is, hey, you'll never believe it, political potluck, including mine. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the show, everybody. Right now, we're talking about our favorite stories of the day. Jenny, you used to be a roller waitress, so serving up stuff shouldn't be so foreign to you. What do you got?
True. Well, I want to talk about the fact that the Grammys got really serious last night, and I actually really enjoyed it. Stars were out, celebrities were raising their voices, but not just in song. They were talking about domestic violence and sexual abuse. First, we saw President Obama come on and talk about itsonus.org, and the hashtag started trending. A great way to get young people, especially, talking about the problem of domestic violence and sexual abuse.
As we saw this year in the NFL with Ray Rice, for instance. It's
Right,
certainly a hot topic.
absolutely. 1 out of 5 women in the U.S. are victims of sexual assault or rape. 1 in 4 are victims of domestic violence. Then we saw Brooke Axtell, who was a victim herself of both sexual trafficking and domestic violence, give such a powerful spoken word performance. And then Katy Perry sang a song about it that was, I've never heard Katy Perry sing so well. I didn't know she was so talented.
I know it's a serious
Here's
topic,
the
but was she
problem.
singing or was she lip syncing like she was at the
was
Super Bowl?
No.
This was a singing.
Yeah.
This was a song this
She
time.
actually
She
was
sang.
singing, yeah.
Okay.
Here's the problem. All of this is great and I support it fully. 2 Grammy nominees were Chris Brown and R. Kelly. Both are perpetrators of domestic violence, and R. Kelly was even arrested for harboring child pornography. Is this a mixed message? What do you think?
Well, I don't think you can pick people to win those awards based on their personal lives.
should
I
there
understand
be-
your point, though. I would not have wanted to see either of them on the stage. You know what I think is fascinating, though? There seems to be this trend that started with the Super Bowl. So many of the commercials were not comedy. They were social messages. And then we see this last night, and everybody's reacted as you are. People took it very much to heart. What's going on here? Is there a social thing that's starting to happen
Heather,
again?
before you
There is.
answer, I need to know what the R&R Kelly stands for.
I have no
I
idea.
don't know.
Ridiculous?
Any
That's a
ideas?
very
Repulsive?
good
No
answer.
idea.
No, I think that I think Jenny's point is well taken, but I knew we were going to talk about this, and I have some conflict about it because I feel as though what's done is done. They've done their punishment if they were convicted, and they have the right to make their money and to pursue creative endeavors. So you weigh that against this idea that it's sort of a double standard for the youth that are seeing it, and it's definitely something that's conflicting. I think ultimately, though, we don't have these people as our pop stars because of the types of people they are. We have them as our pop stars because they're talented, and so they should be there. If they're up for an award, they should be there.
And,
I
bo-
think
and
that-
both of those guys have suffered for the things that
That's
they
right.
did in their
Really?
careers. Absolutely. R. Kelly, Chris Brown, their popularity is a shadow of what it once was.
Well, and
Well, you know, I think artists are really starting to speak up on behalf of victims. They're really starting to use their celebrity in a positive way. We saw Beyonce also, you know,
Tremendous
do a
performance, by the
beautiful
way.
Yes.
performance in honor of Selma. So I'm all for artists using their voices in this
Yeah.
way.
well, it's a great way to engage younger people. You know, as you said, it's the same thing when we saw what happened with the NFL, and now there's been sort of a turnaround, and we really have some awareness of what goes on, and it's going to hopefully lead to some help when it comes to domestic violence.
We shouldn't forget Common and John Legend.
That's
who
right.
did a phenomenal
They were
job
phenomenal as
singing.
well.
And
Absolutely.
they just all are hitting on social points again, which I think is really interesting.
And I-
Reminds me of my youth when we
Yeah,
did that.
and awareness certainly seems to be at a peak now when it comes to sexual assault and,
These
and
issues.
domestic violence, and I appreciate that potluck. Thank you. If we had like an after the show like online thing, I would say we'd have to continue
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I'm selfish and I have to get to my potluck,
Okay, Joe.
which is a very
Typical
serious
man.
topic as well, Crumpton. So last but not least, of course, it's my turn, and I wanted to talk about a killer in the United States that I don't think quite gets enough attention. We always have heard about, and particularly growing up, about drunk driving and teens and how many kids it was killing every year, how many adults it's killing every year, how it obviously can be prevented if just some people are responsible, you get a designated driver, so on. What few people talk about, though, is hands-free devices distracting drivers into fatalities, into death. I have a couple of notes here. 6,000 people each year are killed by texting and driving. It is now the leading cause of death among teens, more than drunk driving. It's texting while driving. And we saw this weekend, certainly with two lawyers there, I'm not about to convict anybody, but Bruce Jenner is being looked at for distracted driving. Whether he was smoking and may have dropped something at the time, maybe he was texting. Police have obtained his phone to see if he was texting at that time. And Rick, Jenny, Heather, this is something that I wish more politicians would start bringing up, and I wish the laws started getting tougher, that if you're caught texting and driving, it is akin to drunk driving.
Joe, in the last year, there was this case that happened in New Jersey where the person who was at home, minding their own business, texting with a driver, could arguably be held liable if they knew the other person was texting and driving.
Yes.
So it is out there, and it's growing. I mean, when Oprah was on, she had people signing contracts that they wouldn't do it, and they'd stick their phone in the trunk of the car. So it is out there, but it's something we need to keep aware of.
Rick,
I'm
quick
with
thought.
you 100%. It should be exactly the same as drunk driving. I'm with you completely on that point.
And I got to leave it here, Jenny, unfortunately. I saw a great billboard, by the way, in Pennsylvania. It said, honk if you love Jesus, text if you want to meet him. And I leave it on that
That's
note.
elaborate.
Great one, great.
Yeah, it was actually. And it was the middle of Pennsylvania. I didn't see that coming. Anyway, coming up, there is one professional basketball team that sure doesn't know how to treat its fans. We'll let you know what that team is. It's next on the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the greatest show on earth, everybody. You know, there really are only two very important rules in sports. Number one is victory. And number two, don't treat thy fans poorly. Well, apparently New York Knicks owner James Dolan doesn't believe in either rule. In fact, after, and you got to listen to this, I still can't get over what I just read. This after longtime Knicks fan Irving Berman, who was 73 years old, wrote Mr. Dolan to let him know why he's so unhappy with the team. Note, the Knicks have won 11 games this season. That's 4 more than the New York Giants. That's 7 more than the New York Jets. The problem is the Knicks have also lost 40 times. That's 11 out of, I mean, they're the worst team in the NBA. And they have Phil Jackson as their GM, and they got Carmelo Anthony and all of that. And by the way, they play a little more games in the NBA than they do in the NFL. Anyway, so it makes sense that a fan of 60 plus years will be upset, right? Well, New York Knicks owner Mr. Dolan, well, he's having none of it. Let's read you his response. You are such a sad person. Why would anybody write such a hateful letter? I am just guessing, but I'll bet your life is a mess and you are a hateful mess. Again, this is the owner of the New York Knicks and also the heir to Cablevision writing this stuff. What have you done that anyone would consider positive or nice? Because, you know, he really knows the guy. Good Lord. I mean, it just goes on. You most likely have been major family miserable. Alcoholic, maybe. Sure, why not just jump right to that whole assumption? I celebrated my 21-year anniversary of sobriety. You should try it. Maybe it will help you become a person that folks would like to have around. Yeah, that's James Dolan saying that. In the meantime, start rooting for the Nets because the Knicks don't want you. That is an email from James Dolan to Mr. Bierman. I mean, you stay classy, Jimbo. So what has been the NBA's response? The league said they would not fine Dolan for his salty email. Jenny Crumpton, should they have?
Look, Dolan is my bless his heart of the day. And remember, that's not a good thing, the bless his heart. Look, when I worked in advertising, one of my clients was Cablevision. So I got used to what we called Dolanisms. We were constantly having to sort of work around things that were said.
Did he send you an email like that?
No.
Okay.
But he did to other people, to customers, etc. We had to sort of, you know, be on the defensive a lot. But, you know, I kind of liken this to Chris Christie a little bit. He has his way that offends a lot of people. And you know that if you say something to him at a press conference or at a gathering, you might just get your head bitten off. A lot of people find that endearing. Some people don't. It's completely unprofessional, however.
Rick, this team, again, let me be clear. They're 11-40.
Oh yeah, they're god awful.
And the owner has the audacity to speak to a fan like this and says, what am I paying for? Because as you've heard, Knick tickets are a little expensive.
Yeah, I have a slightly different concern. I don't know if we're on Cablevision or not, but if we are, and you just went to black, we know why. And if we aren't, well,
Ain't gonna happen.
ain't gonna happen now,
a lot of
is
people
it?
know. I mean, a lot of people who work with him know his tendency to strike back at people.
But
it's not a secret.
But at least in that type of business, there's some accountability. You treat your customers that way, they stop being your customers. I'm finding that when it comes to professional sports, you're untouchable. No matter what you do, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's Goodell and all of his shenanigans, it doesn't matter because the customers keep coming back. So what are the repercussions going to be?
Nobody's selling their season's Knicks tickets.
No, because of this guy? No,
It's horrible PR, though.
Yeah,
And the thing
it
is, to do this in an email, it's like, you know, with Nixon with the tapes.
No.
There is evidence. Of course he's going to go, Mr. Bierman is going to go to the press and say, you won't believe what James Dolan sent me.
And
We
you accuse
already
me of being an
established that,
alcoholic.
right? There's no bad PR.
There's no bad PR.
Everybody's going to be looking at the Knicks and looking at Dolan's past and making jokes about it. That's all that happens in our society anymore.
I'm not sure it's a good idea under any circumstances to publicly accuse somebody of being an alcoholic.
Well, but that's when you start running on
lawyers.
legal
Yeah,
problems. That is
Can he sue him for calling him that?
No, he didn't publish it.
He
I mean,
didn't
when it's
publish
between
it.
the two of you,
Right.
it's the
not a
letter writer who published
The guy
it.
actually
Now, if
published
he-
it.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
he'd
he
have a
did.
difficult.
So,
Now,
yeah,
if,
that's
if,
true.
if somebody within the Knicks organization were to have slipped that letter to a newspaper, a sports
Yes,
writer,
yeah.
then you got something.
Yeah,
Something different
absolutely.
altogether.
And it's, you know, he clearly isn't thinking before, and maybe he has a long history of not thinking before he sends these things. But there's
clearly.
nobody to answer to right now. So we can all laugh about it, and people keep watching the games, even though they stink, and he's nasty.
Celebrities are still going to be on the front row.
Yes, they are.
Not as many anymore. It's
Really?
it's gone down
Yeah.
to D-list. I saw R. Kelly there last night.
Oh, no.
So R, what does the R stand for? And
He has had
Tell me.
punishment for
Yeah,
his bad
this is his
behavior.
punishment. Front row seats. at
That
the
would
Knicks.
be, wouldn't it? incredible.
Well,
Anyway.
we have to wait and see what Spike Lee has to say. Whatever he says will carry the day.
Well, he's a very pragmatic guy, so I'm sure that'll be very
he'll have
very
plenty to
interesting.
say.
By the way, the word I was looking for before when describing green energy was Solyndra.
Solyndra.
Yeah, the name of the company that no
Solyndra.
longer exists, and it's been out of existence so long I couldn't
Overstated
remember.
product.
Anyway, that's a wrap. Thanks to Heather Hansen, Rick Unger, Jenny Crumpton. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. we'll do it again. I'm Joe Concha in New York. Good night.